The flight from Los Angeles to Seattle was supposed to be just another routine business trip for Jordan Reed, a chance to mix work with a short getaway and quality time with his daughters. The gate agents at LAX had scanned their passes without issue. Security was smooth. The girls, Maya and Leah, both 12 years old, had even stopped for a hot chocolate at the terminal cafe, giggling at the foam hearts the barista drew in the cups. They were early boarders, first-class passengers, always were. As they stepped onto the plane, the cabin shimmered in soft amber light. Wide leather seats, real glassware, a tray of champagne waiting on the counter. The girls walked confidently to row 1A and 1B, just as their boarding passes instructed. They knew the drill. They had flown with their father many times before. And Jordan made sure they knew how to act, respectful, quiet, composed. Not because he expected them to impress anyone, but because he understood how the world worked. And he wanted them to be ready for it. Maya pulled her book from her bag. Leah slid her headphones on. Their coats were neatly folded. Their bags were tucked away. The moment felt peaceful. For a minute, it almost felt like a normal flight. Until it didn't. The plane continued boarding. Passengers shuffled in, glancing briefly at the girls as they passed. Some smiled. Most didn't. The girls didn't mind. They were used to being the youngest in the cabin. A few rows back, a woman whispered to her husband and tilted her head toward the girls. He shrugged, but gave a look that lingered a bit too long. Another man walking by stopped and did a double take at Maya, as if expecting to see someone else in her seat. These weren't aggressive stares, just puzzled, subtle loaded. Then came the voice. "Excuse me, girls. You're going to need to move. These seats aren't for you." The flight attendant had appeared so suddenly, her uniform crisp, her badge glinting under the cabin lights. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that made Leah remove her headphones and Maya close her book. "I'm sorry," Maya asked politely. "These seats must have been assigned by mistake," the attendant said, glancing down the aisle as if seeking backup. "We'll need to reassign you toward the back." Leah looked confused. "But this is what our ticket says." The woman didn't respond right away. She just stood there, waiting, impatient, like she'd done this before, like she was confident they wouldn't push back. They were just kids after all. A couple across the aisle shifted uncomfortably. One man looked down at his phone, pretending not to hear. The woman beside him pressed her lips together tightly. One row behind someone whispered, "That's why they ask for ID." Another voice followed, more hushed. "They're probably flying standby." The tension escalated when a second flight attendant quietly walked over and stood just behind the first reinforcement. The girls felt it. Leah looked at her sister and whispered, "Should we move?" Maya shook her head subtly. Their dad had told them, "If you know you're right, stand firm." Then the moment that changed everything, from the front of this plane, a deep voice rang out. "Is there a problem here?" Jordan Reed had just stepped on board his briefcase, slung over one shoulder, his coat in hand. At 6'3", former Navy and now CEO of a cybersecurity company that had recently made headlines for a billion-dollar merger, he was used to walking into rooms and watching people shift. He'd noticed the tension the moment he stepped onto the plane, the silence. The way his daughters were staring up at a flight attendant who stood over them like they were intruders. The flight attendant turned to face him. Her posture straightened. "Sir, we're having a small seating issue." Jordan narrowed his eyes. "Seating issue with my daughters." She blinked. "I wasn't aware they were traveling with an adult." He stepped forward slowly. The air in the cabin tightened. You didn't ask. The passengers were listening now. Heads turned. Phones angled. Jordan walked to the girls, glanced at their tickets, then back at the flight attendant. They are seated exactly where they belong. These seats were purchased under my account. Is there a reason beyond appearance you thought otherwise? Silence. The pilot emerged moments later, sensing the tension. Mr. Reed, perhaps we can discuss this calmly. We have policies about unaccompanied minors. They're not unaccompanied, I'm here. And those policies don't give you license to humiliate my children. The pilot glanced at the attendant. She faltered. Then Jordan leaned in slightly. You didn't check their names. You didn't scan their tickets. You just assumed. That says more about you than it ever could about them. There it was, the heart of it. The thing everyone else was afraid to say out loud. The attendant stammered, I was just doing what I thought was best. No, Jordan said, voice low, steady. You did what was easiest. You saw two black girls in first class alone and decided they didn't belong. Whispers rippled through the cabin. A phone chimed. Someone hit record. Another passenger stood up, quietly walked over and said I saw them board. They were with him. A woman across the aisle stood and added, my daughter's in their class at school. These girls are more polite and put together than most adults I know. Another man cleared his throat, lifting his phone camera slightly. I think we all know what this was. This ends now, Jordan continued. You will apologize to them right here. The pilot tried to interject, but Jordan turned to him. Captain, unless you'd like to explain to the FAA why your crew is reassigning seats without cause, I suggest you reconsider. The flight attendant paled. She looked at the girls, now silent, watching, unsure. Then she knelt slightly. I'm sorry, she said. You're right. I was wrong to assume. The girls didn't respond. Jordan placed a hand on each of their shoulders. The pilot backed off. The cabin went quiet. The rest of the flight passed in relative silence. But the tension lingered. Jordan sat between the girls, one arm across each seat back. He didn't work on his laptop. He didn't sleep. He just sat there, present steady. When they landed in Seattle, Jordan's phone buzzed. The video had already reached social media. It had thousands of shares in under 2 hours. Comments poured in. Journalists were reaching out. Headlines followed. CEO confronts airline over racial bias against daughters. Girls told to move from first class sparked national conversation. The airline issued an official apology. The attendant was suspended. The captain was reassigned. Training policies were rewritten. Legal teams were looped in. Within 48 hours, Jordan was invited to speak on morning news shows. He declined most of them, but gave one short interview. This isn't about me, he said. It's about how easy it is to make children feel small, simply because of how they look. That should never happen at 30,000 feet or anywhere else. But none of that mattered as much to Jordan as the look on Maya's face as they stepped off the plane. Not angry, not triumphant, just aware. The world had shown itself a little more than it had the day before. Jordan squeezed her hand. You know who you are, he whispered, and she nodded. Because she did. This story isn't just about a misunderstanding on a plane. It's about something far deeper, something so many families experience but rarely speak of publicly. It's about the burden of assumptions, the weight of quiet prejudice, the sting of having to prove you belong in a space that you've already paid for, that you've earned simply because of how you look. Jordan didn't just defend his daughters that day. He reminded an entire plane full of people, and eventually millions online. That dignity is not granted by appearance. It's not defined by age or race or who signs the boarding pass. Dignity is inherent. And when it's threatened, silence is complicity. This story resonates because it pulls back the curtain on everyday bias. It reminds us that justice often starts with small moments, moments of discomfort, confrontation, and courage. Jordan could have sat quietly. The girls could have moved to the back, but they didn't. Because teaching our children to stand tall sometimes begins with us standing up. And perhaps the most powerful part of this entire story was the silence at the end, the stunned hush, the look on Maya's face, not of rage or victory, but understanding. In that expression lived a generation's awakening, and maybe, just maybe, a small turning point for the strangers who witnessed it. If you ever find yourself in a situation like this, on a plane, in a classroom, in a boardroom, remember this moment. Choose to speak. Choose to support. Choose to see beyond assumptions. And if this story moved you, if it sparked something in you, then please don't forget to hit that like button. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that speak truth and heart, and leave a comment below. We want to hear your voice, because real change begins when we start listening.